Hello there, I'm Alex, and I sell cheese for a living. As a cheesemonger and certified cheese professional, I've helped thousands of customers find their favorite cheese. Each episode, I'll share what I've learned from behind the counter as we dive into the vast, fascinating world of all things cheese. This week, we talk about the different dairy animals used in cheese making and what makes them so special. You know, when most people hear the word cheese, they picture a cow, a big black and white cow, those are called Holsteins, grazing peacefully in a green meadow. But here's the thing. That's a lot like assuming every wine tastes the same just because it comes from grapes. Cheese is a world unto itself, and the animal that produces the milk is the first brushstroke on that canvas. Today, we're diving into the incredible variety of dairy animals around the world and why some cheeses simply wouldn't exist without very specific breeds. From the everyday cows and goats to sheep, water buffalo, and even the more unusual camel or yak. Each animal brings its own personality to the milk, and that milk shapes the cheeses that we love. Today's episode is going to take us straight to the source, the animals themselves. Milk isn't just milk. It's flavor that comes before the cheesemaker even touches it. It begins with biology, the geography, the diet, and the care of the animals. And we're going to talk about how what they eat changes the taste of the milk, where these animals might thrive, how they are housed, and even some of the cheeses that legally could not exist without them. All right, if we could start with a obvious choice is going to be the cow. Cow's milk is the global standard. It's the backbone of countless cheeses, and for pretty good reason, as we've talked about before. Cows produce large volumes of milk consistently, which makes them ideal for both industrial and artisanal cheesemaking. But not every cow is created equal. The Holstein Friesian, which is, again, the iconic black and white cow, is going to give you huge amounts of milk, but with a slightly lower butterfat content, which makes it perfect for fresh cheeses and bulk production. The next cow we're going to talk about is the Jersey, which are a little smaller, but their milk is rich and creamy, packed with butterfat and protein, which makes them a favorite for more indulgent cheeses and butter. If we were to look at the brown Swiss cows, they provide a beautifully balanced milk that works wonders for Alpine-style cheeses. While Normandy cows, with their high protein and beta-carotene, are celebrated in Normandy-style cheeses. A cow's diet and environment have a huge influence on the milk. Grass-fed cows grazing in alpine pastures produce milk with more aromatic compounds, while grain-fed cows tend to have a milder, more uniform flavor. The birthing cycle matters too. Most cows have one calf per year, and lactation cycles are carefully managed to maximize both yield and milk quality. Housing can range from sprawling pastures to more mechanized barns, and the stress level of the animal directly affects the taste of the milk. Certain cheeses are legally tied to specific breeds, and this is where things get kind of interesting. If you were to look at Comté AOP, for example, by law, it must be made from the milk of the Montbéliard or the French Simmental cows, and those cows must graze within a defined region of the Jura Massif. The rules even dictate stocking density and feed. No silage allowed because fermented feed can alter the milk's microbial profile and ultimately the flavor of the cheese. If you looked at Parmigiano Reggiano DOP, it also carries very strict production rules. The milk must come from cows raised in specific provinces of northern Italy, and their diet is tightly controlled. It relies heavily on local forage, and it prohibits silage. And the resulted milk is designed quite literally to become Parmigiano Reggiano and nothing else. In the Alps, cheeses like Beaufort AOP require taurine or abondance cows, breeds that are uniquely adapted to steep mountain grazing. Reblochon AOP is tied to Abondance, Terrine, and Montbéliard cows. All were chosen for their ability to thrive in high-altitude pasture systems. These aren't arbitrary decisions. They're centuries-long producers learning which breeds produced milk that behaved properly with the traditional recipes that they used. And they needed milk that coagulated correctly. You could age it predictably, and it expressed the aromas of the alpine forage. So when I talk about breed restrictions, I'm not talking about marketing gimmicks. I'm talking about a long feedback loop between animal genetics, landscape, and the human technique involved. And the cheese tastes the way it does because the animal is the way it is. Cows aren't just about the amount of milk that they can produce. The nuances between the breeds and the regions is a little mind-blowing. For instance, alpine pastures with wildflowers, herbs, and rich grasses create milk that is subtly aromatic, and it imparts floral notes into the cheeses like Beaufort or Gruyere. In contrast, cows in lowland areas with a more controlled feed produce milk that is more neutral, which cheesemakers might favor for longer aging cheeses that rely on bacterial cultures to develop flavor rather than the milk itself. Now, let's talk about goats. Before we get into the goat section of the episode, I want to cut in here real quick. When I recorded this, I kept talking about a goat breed that is specific to Roquefort cheese. And for some reason, every time I said the word, I kept saying Lucerne, which is not correct. The breed of sheep for Roquefort is Lacan or Lacon. Lacan. I'm going to say Lacan. And for the Lucerne of it all, not sure where that all came from, but in my notes, I just decided to keep reading the word instead of Lucan as Lucerne, which is not correct. So every time you hear me say that, it's Lacan. Thank you. Let's talk about goats, the little aromatic rebels of the dairy world. Goat milk is unique for its smaller fat globules and the presence of different acids, which can give the milk and the cheeses made from it a distinctive tang. Among the key breeds of goats, the Saanen goats are high yielding and produce mild milk. Alpine goats produce balanced milk that adapts well to different climates. And the Nubians are lower yield but pretty high in butter fat, which gives their cheese a richer, more expressive flavor. Now, goats in nature thrive in rocky, arid, and mountainous regions, which makes them staples for Mediterranean and Middle Eastern dairies. Unlike cows, they browse rather than graze, sampling shrubs, herbs, and woody plants, which directly impacts the taste of their milk. Goats often give birth to twins or triplets, and their lactation cycles are shorter than cows. Proper housing requires dry, draft-free shelters. Sheep, on the other hand, are the fat and protein powerhouses of dairy animals. Sheep milk is intensely rich, though the overall volume is much smaller than the cow or goat milk. The Lucerne breed is the backbone of Roquefort cheese. Sardinian Sarda sheep are critical for Pecorino Sardo, and East Frisian sheep offer higher yield milk with a delicate flavor. Sheep prefer cooler climates and highland pastures, often in transhumance systems where they move seasonally between grazing grounds. Their diet shifts with the seasons, creating milk that varies in flavor throughout the year. Sheep usually breed seasonally, which means milk is available only part of the year, and their housing is a combination of pasture access and nightly shelter. Roquefort AOP and Pecorino Romano DOP are both strictly sheep milk cheeses, but Roquefort goes even further. It must be made specifically from the milk of Lucerne sheep and must be aged in the natural caves of Roquefort-sur-Soulzan. Those caves provide the native Penicillium roqueforti that defines the cheese. Without Lucerne sheep, a breed refined for both milk yield and composition, the texture and balance of salt, blue veining, and the creamy paste simply would not be the same. It would just be a different take on blue. And Pecorino Romano DOP, while produced in several regions, still requires sheep's milk and adheres to strict feed and production guidelines. In Sardinia, Pecorino Sardo DOP depends largely on the native Sarda breed, the animals that have evolved alongside the island's dry pastures and seasonal grazing patterns. Again, this breed is not incidental. It is foundational to the island and the cheeses that they make. One kind of fascinating thing about sheep's milk is how the high fat and protein content allows cheesemakers to create intensely flavorful, long-aging cheeses. Even a small quantity of milk can yield a rich wheel of cheese. Seasonal variations in the forage, from spring pastures full of wildflowers to autumn grasslands, can all dramatically alter the flavor profile of a single batch of cheese. This makes tasting sheep's milk cheeses throughout the year a lesson in both geography and animal care. Finally, we have the water buffalo, the proud source of creamy, high butterfat milk that makes mozzarella di bufala campagna so irresistible. These animals are mainly Mediterranean water buffalo, thriving in wetlands and warm climates. Their milk is incredibly rich, bright white, and perfect for the soft, stretchy cheeses of southern Italy. Buffaloes require access to water to regulate their body temperature. They have longer gestation periods than cows and yield less milk overall. But the richness of that milk is unparalleled. Mozzarella di Bufala Campagna DOP must be made from water buffalo milk, no exceptions, and specifically from the Mediterranean Italian water buffalo raised in designated areas of Campania and Lazio. The production rules regulate everything from feed to timing of processing. The milk must be transformed quickly after milking, preserving its delicate sweetness and elasticity. Substitute cow's milk, and you no longer have mozzarella di bufala campagna. You just have a different cheese entirely. And there are even smaller, more niche protections throughout Europe that tie cheeses to native breeds. These PDO and AOC systems exist not just to protect a name, but to protect biodiversity. If a cheese requires a specific breed, farmers have economic incentive to keep that breed alive. Cheese becomes kind of a conservation tool. Buffalo milk is particularly fascinating because its texture and protein structure create a cheese that melts differently from cow's milk mozzarella. That luxurious stretch, the tender bite, and the creamy flavor all stem from the animal's milk itself. Even small changes in diet or habitat can subtly shift the flavor, which is why high quality mozzarella producers are so particular about how their buffaloes are cared for. While cows, goats, sheep, and buffalo dominate the dairy world, other animals can make extraordinary contributions in their regions. Camels, for instance, produce naturally homogenized milk high in vitamin C, which is an essential staple in arid regions. Turning camel milk into cheese has traditionally been challenging, but innovative cheesemakers are slowly finding ways to harness its unique properties. You have yaks, which are a high altitude specialist, and they have incredibly fatty milk, and they are used in Himalayan cheeses. Their milk is perfect for crafting cheeses that can be stored over long winters and survive harsh climates. You could look at reindeer milk, which is rich and seasonal, and it's integral to traditions in Scandinavia, where every drop is highly valued. Even more obscene animals like the Mithun in northeast India or the water buffalo in Southeast Asia highlight the incredible adaptability of dairy production. In every case, the milk reflects the animal's diet, environment, and lifestyle. Tasting cheese from these rare sources is like tasting a little bit of that culture, a piece of the climate, and their history all at once. When we taste cheese, we are tasting remnants of an animal's life. And that might sound a little over the top, but it's chemically true. The fat to protein ratio of milk determines how a curd forms, so how much moisture it retains and how it will age. Higher butterfat often leads to a more supple, creamy texture. Higher protein content can mean firmer structure and better aging potential. Sheep's milk, with its dense solids, creates cheeses that feel concentrated and luxurious. Goat's milk, with its distinct fatty acid profile, delivers brightness and tang. Cow's milk, depending on the breed, can lean, delicate, or decadently rich. But it goes even beyond fat and protein. The microbial life present in raw milk varies by species and by farm. The bacteria that live in a cow's udder in the Ura region are not the same as those in a goat herd in the Loire Valley. Those microbial communities influence fermentation, the rind development, and flavor complexity. Even in pasteurized systems, the baseline composition of the milk shapes how added cultures behave. And then there's the feed. A pasture filled with wild thyme or clover and various alpine flowers, it will produce milk laced with subtle aromatic compounds. As if you had a grain heavy diet, you would tend to produce more neutral milk. In PDO systems like Conte or Buffer, banned silage isn't about tradition for tradition's sake. It's about preventing unwanted fermentation compounds from entering the milk and interfering with aging. The feed becomes the flavor, and the flavor becomes the identity. And where you keep the animals also matters if you would think about the housing and their stress levels. Animals under chronic stress produce milk with altered hormone levels, which can subtly affect flavor and yield. Comfortable animals with consistent routines produce more stable milk. This is why animal welfare and cheese quality are often deeply intertwined. Good animal husbandry isn't just ethical, it's very practical. Breed diversity also affects resilience. Local breeds like the Sarda sheep or the Abundance cow are adapted to specific climates and terrains. They may produce less milk than high yield industrial breeds, but their milk is often better suited to traditional cheesemaking in those regions. By tying cheeses to breeds through PDO or AOC regulations, producers preserve not only flavor, but the genetic diversity of the animals. In a world where agriculture often tends towards uniformity, that protection is significant. And here's something I love thinking about. When you taste Roquefort, you are tasting the Lucerne sheep grazing in a particular part of southern France, milked during a specific season, aged in caves with naturally circulating air. And when you taste Parmigiano Reggiano, you are tasting milk from cows eating regional forage, transformed within hours into massive wheels that will age for years. These cheeses are complete ecosystems in a way. It's not just the recipes to get from milk to cheese. Understanding the breed and animal isn't about memorizing trivia. It's about deepening the appreciation for them. When you know that mozzarella di bufala campagna comes from water buffalo that cool themselves in marshy pastures, and that Pecorino Romano depends on hardy sheep grazing the Mediterranean scrub, that Conte relies on mountain cows eating summer grass, you begin to taste a little more intentionally. You begin to connect the flavor to the life of the animals that helped produce what you're eating. Terroir, in the fullest sense, begins with the animal. The land feeds the animal produces the milk becomes the cheese, and the cheese carries the entire chain forward into your hands. In closing, cheese is a collaboration between humans and animals. Today, we gently explored cows, goats, sheep, and water buffalo, and we even dipped into rarer animals like camels and yaks. We talked about breeds, diets, climates, and housing, and I even highlighted how each factor influences the milk and the cheeses it produces. From Conte and Roquefort to mozzarella di bufala campagna, we've seen that terroir begins with the animal. The next time you reach for a wedge or a slice of any cheese that doesn't come vacuum sealed, take a moment to consider the life behind the milk. Think about the breed, perhaps the diet of the animal, the landscape that the animal was looking at the day the animal was milked, and all the care that helped shape that milk into the cheese you are eating. Every cheese is a story waiting to be told. I would like to say a big thank you to all the dairy animals in the world for sharing their wonderful milk with us so we may enjoy cheese. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. My name is Alex, and this has been The Modern Monger.